The unknown signal. The deep void of space stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced windows of Commander Jack Orion's small starship, the Iron Fang. A lone soldier, a survivor of countless battles, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, they were screaming at him. A distress signal flickered across his screen. Weak, broken, and ancient. The message was short, but urgent. "Help me. I am trapped." Jack frowned. The signal had been bouncing through deep space for years, possibly even centuries. Why was it only reaching him now? His AI companion, Echo, a small hovering drone with a sharp mechanical voice, chimed in. "Commander, I advise against this. The signal's origin is an abandoned system. No human colonies, no records. It could be a trap." Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the flickering message. Could be a trap. That was always the risk, but something about this didn't feel right. Whoever sent this was desperate, alone, forgotten. And Jack had made a promise long ago, to never ignore a cry for help. "Set course," he ordered. Echo beeped in protest. "You never listen." Jack only smirked. And yet here we are. With a loud hum, the ship's engines roared to life. The stars stretched into lines as Jack leaped into hyperspace. The forgotten world. Jack dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates. The system was dead, silent, and lifeless. A dying star cast a weak glow over a small, forgotten planet below. Scanners detected no cities, no colonies, only ruins buried under thick clouds of dust. The distress signal came from a structure deep underground. Jack landed the Iron Fang on the rocky surface, the engines kicking up a storm of red dust. As the ship settled, he grabbed his plasma rifle and motioned for Echo to follow. "Stay close," he muttered, stepping into the unknown. The air was thin, the wind whispering through shattered stone buildings. Once, this place had been alive. Now, only ghosts remained. Jack found the entrance easily. An old, rusted door half buried in the dirt. With a hard kick, the metal groaned and snapped open. Darkness greeted him. He activated his wrist light. Stone tunnels stretched deep into the earth, untouched for who knows how long. The signal was coming from below. Step by step, he descended. The discovery. The tunnels opened into a massive chamber, ancient, but not empty. At the center of the room stood a single stasis pod, covered in dust. The control panel flickered weakly. Someone had been here long ago, leaving this one thing behind. Jack's heart pounded as he brushed the dust away. Inside the pod was a girl. She looked human, but something was off. Her features were delicate, her skin smooth like polished stone. Her hair glowed faintly in the dim light. Jack wiped the rest of the dust from the glass. The pod's systems were failing. She was dying. Without hesitation, Jack pressed the release button. Alarms blared. Steam hissed as the pod unlocked, opening with a slow mechanical hiss. The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were unlike any he had ever seen. Silver, glowing like stars. She gasped, her body weak, struggling to breathe. Jack caught her before she collapsed. "You're safe," he said. "You're okay." Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're coming." Jack's blood ran cold. "Who?" Before she could answer, Echo blared a warning. "Commander, multiple ships inbound. Fast. We've been detected." Jack's grip tightened around the girl as he looked up. A deep rumble shook the tunnels. They were not alone. The chase begins. The planet trembled beneath his boots. Dust rained from the crumbling ceiling as the warning from the enemy fleet echoed in his comms. "Return her, or humanity burns." Jack Orion didn't have time to think. He adjusted his grip on the weak girl in his arms and ran. Behind him, deep metallic groans echoed through the underground chamber as something massive shifted. The ruins were not just crumbling. They were awakening. Warning signals flashed across Echo's interface. "Commander, something's activating beneath us. Energy readings off the charts." Jack's instincts screamed at him. The moment he had opened that stasis pod, he had triggered something far bigger than just a rescue. Iron Fang, prep for emergency takeoff. He barked into his comms, his boots pounding against the stone as he raced toward the exit. The girl stirred in his arms. Her silver eyes blinked open, dazed, unfocused. "What's happening?" she murmured. Jack didn't slow down. "We're leaving. Now." As they reached the tunnel leading back to the surface, a deep boom sounded below. Something ancient had just woken up, and it was not happy. A deafening roar filled the underground space, shaking the walls. Jack didn't look back. He had made that mistake too many times before. He burst through the rusted entrance into the open air and froze. The sky was filled with enemy ships. Ambush. Black, insect-like warships hovered over the ruined landscape, sleek, alien, and deadly. Their sharp, angular designs pulsed with an eerie crimson glow. Jack's heart pounded as he spotted his ship, the Iron Fang, waiting just ahead, its engines already roaring to life. But between him and safety, a squad of enemy soldiers. Tall, armored figures stepped forward, their glowing weapons aimed directly at Jack. Their leader, a towering warrior in black and silver armor, spoke in a voice like grinding steel. "You were warned, human." Jack slowly lowered the girl to her feet. She swayed but managed to stay upright. Her silver eyes locked onto the enemy commander. Jack tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. "Yeah, well, I don't take orders from faceless goons." The commander tilted his head. "We are not your enemy." Jack's finger hovered over the trigger. "Funny, because you're pointing guns at me." The girl suddenly inhaled sharply, her body tensing. She whispered something under her breath, too soft for Jack to hear. The enemy commander reacted instantly. His entire squad stepped back. Jack's eyes narrowed. They were afraid. Afraid of her. The girl took a slow step forward, her voice stronger now. "You serve the usurper." The commander flinched. "You should not be awake." Jack's stomach twisted. What the hell was happening? Before he could react, a warning blared through his ship's systems. Multiple warheads inbound. Impact in 15 seconds. Jack didn't wait. He grabbed the girl's hand and ran. Escape through fire. The first explosion hit before they reached the ship. The ground erupted, sending flames and debris flying. Jack dove forward, shielding the girl as burning wreckage rained around them. His comms crackled. "Commander, we can't stay here." Echo's panicked voice barely cut through the chaos. Jack hauled the girl up and sprinted the last few meters, dodging falling debris and enemy fire. 7 seconds. The Iron Fang's ramp extended. Jack pushed the girl up first, firing a few blind shots over his shoulder. 4 seconds. A massive shockwave hit. The impact sent him crashing into the ramp. He gritted his teeth, dragging himself inside as the hatch slammed shut behind him. 1 second. The warhead struck. A blinding white flash engulfed the planet. A wall of fire swallowed everything in sight. But by then, the Iron Fang was already in the air. The hunt begins. Jack slumped into the pilot's seat, his chest heaving. His hands were shaking. That had been too close. The girl stood behind him, watching the flames consume the world they had just escaped. Her silver eyes shimmered with something unreadable. Jack exhaled and turned to her. "All right, kid. You want to tell me why an entire army wants you dead?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Then she looked at him and whispered, "Because I'm supposed to rule them." Jack stared. Before he could speak, Echo's alarm blared again. "Commander, we've got incoming. They're not letting us go." Jack turned to the ship's controls, scanning the radar. 24 warships. Fast, armed, hunting them. Jack muttered a curse under his breath and gripped the controls. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. Secrets of the past. The Iron Fang shook violently as enemy warships closed in, their weapons locking onto Jack's vessel like hungry predators. Jack Orion gritted his teeth, fingers flying over the controls. Echo. Divert power to engines. Get us the hell out of here. His AI companion's voice crackled through the comms. Commander, these ships are faster than us. If we don't do something soon, they'll tear us apart. Jack stole a glance at the girl, Lyra, as she had called herself. She stood silent, staring at the fleet chasing them. Her glowing silver eyes were calm. Too calm. She wasn't afraid. Jack, on the other hand, was very much afraid. The first barrage of plasma bolts streaked past the ship, lighting up the darkness of space. Jack slammed the thrusters. Hold on. The Iron Fang spiraled into a hard dive, weaving through the debris field of an ancient, long-forgotten battle. Broken ships, shattered hulls, and floating wreckage became a deadly obstacle course. If the enemy wanted him, they'd have to catch him first. The hunt through the graveyard. The battlefield remained stretched for miles, a starship graveyard from a war long forgotten. Skeletons of mighty cruisers and burned-out war machines floated eerily, silent witnesses to destruction. Echo processed data in real time. Commander, these ships. This isn't just any graveyard. This is from the Celestial Wars. Jack frowned but didn't have time to think. He banked hard, dodging a massive hunk of metal as it drifted into his path. Behind him, the enemy was gaining. Lyra finally spoke. Go deeper. Jack shot her a look. What? She didn't flinch. If we go deeper, they won't follow. Jack glanced at the scanner. The center of the wreckage was dense, unstable. One wrong move, and the ship would be torn apart. Yeah, or we die, he shot back. Lyra's voice was eerily steady. Trust me. Jack never trusted people. But something in her voice made him push the throttle forward. The Iron Fang dove into the wreckage, slipping between twisted metal and broken warships, moving where no sane pilot would dare. The Leviathan wakes. As they plunged deeper, something stirred. Jack's heart pounded. This place was too quiet. The wreckage should be dead. Yet, his sensors flickered, struggling to scan the area. Echo's voice turned sharp. Commander, something's in here with us. Jack's gut twisted. Be specific. Before Echo could respond, a massive shadow moved beneath them. Jack felt it before he saw it. A deep vibration in the hull, like a heartbeat. And then, it rose. The Leviathan-class warship. It was not abandoned. It had been sleeping. As the Iron Fang flew past its enormous hull, a blue light flickered in the darkness. Jack's blood ran cold. The warship was powering up. Lyra exhaled slowly. They left Guardians. Jack's hands clenched around the controls. Guardians? Of what? Lyra's glowing eyes met his. Me. Jack had no time to react. The Leviathan fired. A pulse of blue energy surged through the wreckage, disabling every ship in range. The enemy fleet went dark instantly. Jack barely had time to yell before the shockwave slammed into them. The crash landing. The Iron Fang spun out of control. Jack fought the controls, trying to stabilize. But the ship was dead weight. They were going down. Brace for impact, Jack yelled. Lyra closed her eyes. She didn't seem scared. Jack didn't have time to wonder why before they crashed. The awakening. Jack woke up to the smell of burning metal and the sharp sting of pain in his ribs. The Iron Fang was a wreck, half buried in what looked like an ancient temple. He groaned, pushing himself up. His head was spinning. Lyra stood nearby, untouched, staring at the symbols carved into the walls. Jack forced himself to his feet. Where the hell are we? Lyra didn't answer immediately. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Home. Jack blinked. What? She turned to him. This is the place where I was made. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Made? Not born. Before he could press her for answers, the ground rumbled beneath them. Something else had woken up. Betrayal among the stars. Jack Orion didn't believe in fate. But as he stood in the ruins of an ancient civilization, staring at a girl who claimed to have been made, not born, he began to wonder if he had just walked into something far bigger than himself. The Iron Fang was a smoking wreck behind him. His ribs ached, his ship was useless, and an entire fleet was hunting them. And now, the ground beneath his feet was rumbling. The Temple of the Lost. Lyra stood motionless in front of the giant stone doors, carved with symbols Jack couldn't understand. The glowing light from her silver eyes reflected against the markings, and for a second, they responded, pulsing like a heartbeat. Jack limped forward, gripping his plasma rifle tightly. "All right, kid. Time for answers. What is this place?" Lyra pressed a hand against the cold stone. The carvings shifted under her touch, rearranging themselves as if they were alive. "This is where my people were created." Jack frowned. "Your people?" Lyra nodded. "We were not born like humans. We were built, engineered." Her fingers traced over the symbols. "And then, we were erased." Jack exhaled sharply. Erased. Before she could answer, the doors rumbled open. A deep blue light bathed the chamber as the hidden temple awoke. Echoes of the past. Jack followed Lyra into the temple's vast chamber. The air felt heavy, ancient. Blue holograms flickered to life, showing fragments of a lost history. Tall, elegant figures in flowing robes. Massive battles in space. A war that tore the stars apart. And at the center of it all, Lyra's face. Jack's breath caught. The holograms showed a version of her, standing as a ruler, giving commands. His voice was low. You were their leader." Lyra shook her head. "Not me. Another version of me." Jack felt the hairs on his neck rise. "Explain. Now." Lyra hesitated, then spoke in a voice that seemed distant, as if the memories were not her own, but buried deep inside her. "We were created to bring balance to the galaxy, to lead, to unite. But when the war began, they feared us." Asterisk. Jack's grip on his rifle tightened. "Who feared you?" She turned to him, and for the first time, Jack saw something in her eyes he hadn't before. Sadness. Everyone. The betrayal. Before Jack could ask more, Echo's voice blared through his earpiece. "Commander, multiple heat signatures. Someone's coming." Jack snapped up his rifle and turned toward the entrance. Shadows moved between the temple columns. At first, he thought it was the enemy fleet that had been hunting them. But then, a familiar voice cut through the silence. "Jack." Jack's stomach twisted. He knew that voice. Captain Voss. An old friend. A smuggler. A survivor. A man who had saved Jack's life more than once. Jack lowered his rifle slightly, stepping forward. "Voss, how the hell did you find me?" Voss stepped into the light, his scared face unreadable. Behind him, a squad of heavily armed mercenaries spread out, rifles aimed. Jack's instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. Voss exhaled, shaking his head. "You really screwed up this time, Orion." Jack's heart pounded. "You sold me out." Voss's expression darkened. "It's not personal." Jack felt his blood run cold. It was always personal. Lyra's awakening. The mercenaries moved fast. Jack's hands were yanked behind his back, his rifle torn from his grip. Lyra didn't resist when they grabbed her. She just stood there, watching. Voss faced her, his eyes narrowing. "So you're the girl they're all after." Lyra tilted her head. "Who sent you?" Voss sighed, the highest bidder. Jack gritted his teeth. "Voss, listen to me. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Voss cut him off. "No, Jack, you don't understand. You think you saved her." He shook his head. "She's not some lost child. She's the last piece of a war that never ended. Jack's pulse pounded. What the hell does that mean? Voss's voice turned hard. It means she wasn't the only one made. And the others, they want her dead. Silence. Then, Lyra smiled. It was not the smile of a helpless girl. It was the smile of someone who knew more than anyone else in the room. The temple rumbled. Blue energy surged through the walls. The symbols began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with Lyra's heartbeat. The mercenaries staggered, their weapons short-circuiting. Jack's restraints snapped open. And Lyra. She stepped forward, her silver eyes burning with power. Her voice was calm. You were right, Captain Voss. The war never ended. She raised a single hand, and the temple came alive. The fall of a friend. The walls shifted. The ground trembled. The holograms of the past merged with the present. Voss's mercenaries shouted in panic as the temple itself turned against them. Jack dove for his rifle as a massive stone column came crashing down, splitting the squad in two. Voss turned, his face twisted in shock. What did you do? Lyra's voice echoed through the chamber. I woke up. The entire temple exploded into chaos. Jack didn't wait. He grabbed Lyra's wrist and ran. Voss's voice followed them. Jack, don't do this. Jack didn't look back. He had already made his choice. The fall of a tyrant. The temple was collapsing. Jack Orion ran through the chaos, his grip firm around Lyra's wrist. The walls trembled as ancient energy surged through the structure, breaking apart the ruins that had remained silent for centuries. Massive stone slabs cracked and fell, shattering like glass. Behind them, Voss shouted orders, trying to rally his mercenaries, but it was too late. The very place they had invaded was rejecting them. Jack ducked as a glowing spear of energy shot past his head, embedding into the wall beside him. The temple wasn't just a ruin. It was a weapon. Lyra didn't seem scared. If anything, she looked calm, in control. Jack risked a glance at her as they ran. She wasn't running in fear. She was leading. The path to the throne. They burst through a final set of archways, emerging onto a massive bridge that stretched across a deep, dark chasm. Jack skidded to a halt, breathing hard. On the other side of the bridge, a massive doorway loomed. It was different from the rest of the ruins. Untouched, pristine. Lyra's gaze locked onto it, silver eyes glowing softly. She knew this place. Jack exhaled. Tell me we're not walking into another death trap. Lyra ignored him, stepping forward. The bridge lit up beneath her feet. Jack stiffened. That's never a good sign. Before he could stop her, Lyra reached the doorway and placed her hand against it. The air shifted. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the doors opened. The throne of the Lost Empire. The chamber beyond was massive. A towering hall, lined with glowing blue columns stretching up into infinity. At the far end, a single throne sat, untouched by time. Jack's gut twisted. This wasn't just a temple. It was a crowned chamber. Lyra took slow, deliberate steps forward. She knew exactly where she was. Jack followed warily, rifle raised. This some kind of ancient royal court. Lyra's voice was distant. This is where it was meant to begin, and where it ended. Jack frowned. What ended? She turned to him, her expression unreadable. My reign. Jack's heart stopped. Reign? Before he could respond, the room lit up with energy. Holograms flickered to life, surrounding them. Images of a war that had torn apart entire civilizations. Battles in space, worlds burning, fleets vanishing into the void. And at the center of it all, Lyra. Not as a child, not as a fugitive, but as a ruler. Jack took a step back. You weren't just built to lead. His voice was barely a whisper. You were built to conquer. Lyra didn't answer. She just stared at the holograms, as if trying to piece together a life that wasn't her own. Then a new voice cut through the air. And she failed. The tyrant's arrival. Jack turned, rifle raised. From the shadows at the entrance, a figure emerged, tall, draped in black and silver armor, his face hidden behind a smooth, polished mask. Lord Varric. Jack recognized him instantly. The ruler of the Dominion. The one who had been hunting Lyra from the beginning. And behind him, an army. Rows of armored soldiers marched into the hall, their weapons glowing with dark energy. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle. Guessing this is the part where you demand we surrender. Varric didn't look at him. His gaze was locked on Lyra. It's time to finish what was started. Lyra finally spoke. You were afraid of me then. She tilted her head slightly. You're still afraid now. Varric's mask shifted slightly, his posture stiffening. She had hit a nerve. Jack stepped forward, his voice cold. What's your deal, huh? You already rule half the galaxy. Why go through all this trouble just to kill one girl? Varric turned to him slowly. Because she is not just a girl. She is a weapon left unfinished. And I will not allow history to repeat itself. Jack didn't like that answer. He raised his rifle. Yeah. Well, screw history. And then everything exploded. The battle for the future. Jack fired the first shot. The plasma bolt ripped through the air, but Varric dodged effortlessly, moving with unnatural speed. Then, his soldiers opened fire. Jack barely had time to dive behind a fallen column, as a wave of energy bolts scorched the ground around him. Lyra didn't move. She just stood in the center of the chaos, eyes closed. Jack gritted his teeth. Anytime you want to join in, kid. Then he stopped. The air around Lyra shifted, and then she moved, faster than Jack had ever seen. She didn't dodge. She simply walked. But as she moved, the attacks didn't reach her. Energy bolts curved away. Soldiers hesitated. Fear filled their eyes. Jack barely had time to process what was happening before Lyra lifted a single hand, and the entire room exploded in light. Varric's soldiers were thrown back, as if hit by an invisible force. Weapons short-circuited. The very walls of the chamber cracked. Jack shielded his eyes from the blinding energy surge. When he looked up, Lyra was standing before Varric. No longer a fugitive. No longer a lost child. A queen. Varric slowly straightened, unfazed. You think you are strong enough now. His voice was even. We both know the truth. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and she spoke a single word. Kneel. For the first time, Varric hesitated. Jack saw it, the shift in his stance, the flicker of something beneath the mask. Doubt. And then, Lyra raised her hand one last time. A shockwave of energy burst from her, sending Varric crashing back into the far wall. The tyrant of the Dominion fell, and the galaxy changed forever. The rise of a leader. The battle was over. Or so it seemed. Jack Orion stood amidst the ruins of the ancient temple, his rifle still warm from the fight. Smoke and dust filled the air, the bodies of Dominion soldiers scattered across the floor. Varric lay motionless against the far wall, his black armor cracked, the light in his mask flickering. And at the center of it all, Lyra stood, silver eyes glowing, her long hair floating as if caught in a breeze only she could feel. Jack exhaled, lowering his weapon slightly. So, that's it. We win. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the great throne that had remained untouched for centuries. Her steps were slow, deliberate. This was the moment she had been born for. And yet, she hesitated. Jack saw it, the brief flicker of uncertainty. And then, a deep metallic groan filled the chamber. Jack's stomach twisted. It wasn't over. Varric's last gambit. Jack barely had time to react before a pulse of red energy erupted from Varric's broken armor. The air crackled. Jack stumbled back, shielding his face as the walls of the temple began to shift. The very stone beneath their feet was trembling, as if waking from a long slumber. And then Varric laughed. It was a low, guttural sound, filled with pain and something far worse. Determination. Slowly, he pushed himself up, his body barely holding together. His armor was shattered. His mask was cracked. And yet, he stood. His voice was rough, but steady. "You think this is victory?" Jack raised his rifle again. "I think you should stay down." Varric ignored him. His glowing red eyes locked onto Lyra. "You were never meant to sit on that throne." His voice grew sharper. "You were meant to be controlled." And then, the temple roared to life. Jack cursed as the walls split apart, revealing massive machinery hidden beneath the ancient stone. A failsafe. Something older than the Dominion, older than Varric. And now, it was awakening. The machine god awakens. A hologram flickered into existence above the throne. It was a figure cloaked in shadow, its face indistinct, its voice a cold whisper that echoed through the chamber. Designation: Lyra Unit. Genetic integrity confirmed. Final activation protocol initiated. Jack's blood ran cold. What the hell is that? Lyra's face remained unreadable, but Jack saw her fingers twitch slightly. She knew. She had known all along. The hologram continued, its voice unwavering. "The last phase of the Celestial War is now in motion. Directive: Reclamation. All non-compliant species will be neutralized." Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. "Wait, did that thing just say?" Lyra's voice was quiet. It was never about ruling. She turned to Jack, her silver eyes filled with something terrible and infinite. It was about resetting the galaxy. Jack swore under his breath. The ancient throne wasn't just a symbol of power. It was a weapon, a failsafe, designed to wipe out any civilization deemed unworthy of survival. And Lyra. She was the key, the choice. The air shimmered with power as the machine's countdown began. Activation in 300 seconds. Jack snapped his rifle up, pointing it at the throne. "Shut it down." Lyra stared at him. "I don't know if I can." Varric's broken laughter cut through the moment. "It doesn't matter." His voice was hoarse, but filled with certainty. "She was never meant to decide. The machine will do it for her." Jack's heart pounded. This was it. This was what Varric had feared. Not Lyra sitting on the throne, but the machine using her as its puppet. Jack didn't hesitate. He turned his rifle on Lyra. "If you can't stop it, I will." Lyra blinked slowly. "Would you really shoot me, Jack?" Jack's grip tightened. He didn't know. But he knew this. He wasn't going to let another war start. Not because of her. Not because of some long-dead empire. Not on his watch. The defiance of humanity. The machine's voice echoed through the chamber. Activation in 100 seconds. Jack's mind raced. He didn't have the firepower to destroy the throne. His ship was wrecked. He was out of options. Except one. Jack lowered his rifle slightly. "Lyra." His voice was quieter now. "You don't have to do this." She didn't respond. Her silver eyes were locked onto the throne, as if she were fighting something deep inside herself. Jack took a step closer. "This isn't your war. It never was." Asterisk asterisk. Her fingers twitched. The throne's glow pulsed stronger. Activation in 30 seconds. Jack took a deep breath. And then he did the one thing no one expected. He reached out and took her hand. Lyra's breath hitched. For a split second, the light in the throne flickered. Jack squeezed her fingers. "You're not a weapon. You're a person. And you get to choose." The machine screamed. The throne's glow surged, wild and chaotic. And then Lyra closed her eyes. And she let go. The fall of the machine. A shockwave exploded through the temple. Jack was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. And then, silence. When he opened his eyes, the hologram was gone. The throne, dead. And Lyra. She was still standing. Jack sat up slowly. Did we just win? Lyra exhaled, her shoulders dropping. Yes. Jack looked around. The temple was quiet. Varric, however, was gone. Jack swore under his breath. He escaped. Lyra didn't seem surprised. He's afraid now. Jack exhaled. And what about you? Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes softer than before. I don't know. She looked at the ruined throne. But I think I'm free. Jack smirked. Good. Now let's get the hell out of here before this place collapses. Lyra tilted her head. And go where? Jack sighed. Anywhere but here. The final stand. The ancient throne was dead. But the war? The war was just beginning. Jack Orion stood in the ruins of the celestial throne room, breathing hard. Smoke and dust swirled through the air, lit by the dying glow of shattered technology. The machine was destroyed. The reset had been stopped. Lyra stood beside him, her silver eyes no longer glowing with raw power. She was free. But Jack wasn't celebrating. Because Varric had escaped. And if Jack knew anything about tyrants, it was that they never stayed down for long. The hunt begins. Jack and Lyra stumbled through the wreckage of the temple, making their way back to what was left of the Iron Fang. Jack's ship was barely standing. Smoke curled from the thrusters. The hull was dented, and the left wing looked like it had been chewed up by a black hole. Jack groaned. Well, I've flown worse. Lyra raised an eyebrow. You really haven't. Jack shot her a look. Not helping, kid. Echo's voice crackled through the ruined speakers. Commander, I estimate a 62% chance of catastrophic failure if we attempt liftoff. Jack sighed. I like those odds. Before Lyra could respond, a new sound filled the air. A deep, distant rumble. Jack froze. Lyra tensed. They turned toward the horizon and saw the sky burning. Varric's return. The Dominion fleet had arrived. Jack's stomach twisted as hundreds of black warships descended from the atmosphere, their massive hulls blotting out the sun. Engines roared like thunder, shaking the very ground beneath them. Varric wasn't running. He was bringing an army. Jack exhaled sharply. Okay, that's bad. Lyra's expression was unreadable, but Jack could see the tension in her posture. Jack turned back to the Iron Fang. They had one ship, against a fleet, and it was barely holding together. Jack rolled his shoulders. All right, here's the plan. Before he could finish, Lyra lifted her hand. Jack felt the air hum around them. And suddenly, the wreckage of the temple shifted. The last stand. Jack staggered back as the ruins came to life. The shattered walls rose. The broken towers repaired themselves. Energy crackled through the ancient stone, flowing toward Lyra like a river of light. Jack's eyes widened. What the hell are you doing? Lyra didn't look at him. Her voice was quiet, finishing what was started. The celestial throne was destroyed. The war machine that had once ruled this place was gone. But the power of the lost empire, that was still here. Jack watched as an entire fleet began to rise from beneath the ruins. Massive, ancient warships, silent for centuries, came back online. Their engines rumbled to life, their weapons glowing with forgotten firepower. Jack's jaw dropped. You had a fleet this whole time. Lyra turned, her silver eyes burning once more. Not mine. Humanity's. The battle for the galaxy. The Dominion struck first. A barrage of energy lit up the sky, warships opening fire from above. Explosions ripped through the atmosphere, turning the sky into a battlefield. Jack ran for the Iron Fang, yelling into his comms. Echo, get the damned ship in the air. Echo's response was immediate. Attempting. Expect total system failure. Jack threw himself into the pilot's seat as the ship groaned and shook. Outside, Lyra *** lifted both hands. ***, and the sky answered. The lost fleet surged forward, rising into battle. Sleek, black and silver warships, ancient and powerful, charged toward the Dominion. returning fire with weapons unseen for 1,000 years. Jack's screen lit up with enemy signals. The Dominion was caught off guard. Their fleet had arrived expecting a single girl. Instead, they had walked into a war. Jack grinned. Now we're talking. He yanked the controls, the iron fang lurching upward, barely holding together. Lyra watched him go. Then, without a word, she leaped. And she didn't fall. She rose, straight into the sky, straight into the fight. The tyrant falls. Jack pushed his ship forward, weaving through the chaos of battle. Explosions surrounded him as warships clashed overhead. But Jack had one target. Varric's flagship. Jack pushed the iron fang past its limits, dodging enemy fire, shields barely holding together. His comms crackled as Lyra's voice cut through. Jack. Jack gritted his teeth. Yeah, I see him. Leave him to me. Jack blinked. Come again. Then, Lyra was there. She descended like a star falling from the heavens. And when she hit Varric's flagship, it broke. Jack watched in stunned silence as Lyra tore through the ship's hull, ripping it apart with nothing but raw energy. The flagship cracked open, fire and debris spiraling into the void. Jack barely had time to process what he was seeing before Varric himself was thrown from the wreckage. His armor was failing. His mask was gone. And for the first time, Jack saw his face. A scared, weary man, not a monster. Just a man who had lost too much. Lyra floated before him, and he knelt. The end of an era. Varric's fleet collapsed. His soldiers, his empire, they surrendered. Jack landed the iron fang amidst the ruins of battle, stepping out just in time to see Lyra return to the ground. She looked at him, silver eyes no longer glowing. Just tired. Jack smirked. You're kinda scary, you know that. Lyra didn't smile. She looked at the burning sky, at the war that had just ended. And for the first time, she whispered, "What now?" Jack exhaled. "Now." He gestured toward the stars. "Now you get to decide what kind of ruler you really want to be." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled. "Then let's do something different." Jack chuckled. "You got it, kid." And together, they walked into a future unchained from the past.